Everyone knows the tribal names from movies and textbooks, but what if everything you learned was deliberately incomplete? Some of these facts were actively buried. Others simply never made it into classrooms. Here are 30 shocking realities they never wanted you to discover. Let's start with something that sounds simple, but reveals how complex this really gets. 574 federally recognized tribes exist in the United States today. Each has its own government, culture, and history spanning thousands of years. Over 60 other tribes are only recognized by state governments. Meanwhile, dozens more exist without any recognition. It's like being the only kid at school whose existence the principal refuses to admit. Recognition determines everything. Funding for healthcare, education, housing, legal rights to ancestral lands. Without federal recognition, tribes can't access billions in government programs. Then there's the Lumbee tribe, which sits in bureaucratic limbo. They're partially recognized, but don't get full benefits. With over 55,000 members, they've been fighting for recognition since the 1950s. The process is brutal. Tribes must prove continuous existence since historical times. The requirements are designed to exclude rather than include. Recognition determines sovereignty. Recognized tribes can make laws, operate courts, and manage affairs independently. This isn't symbolic, it's real political power. What's striking is how many distinct ways these communities once communicated. Over 300 distinct native languages existed before European contact. Each represented an entire worldview. Today, only about 175 survive. Navajo remains the most spoken with over 150,000 speakers, but even that number drops as younger generations switch to English. Watching a language die is like watching someone's grandmother's recipes disappear forever. Cherokee developed its own writing system in the 1820s. Within years, Cherokee literacy rates exceeded neighboring white settlers. Language preservation gets creative now. Some tribes dub popular movies into native tongues. Disney's Finding Nemo exists in Navajo. But here's the tragic reality. When an elder dies, entire dictionaries disappear. Words for plants, animals, and spiritual concepts vanish forever. Some languages have fewer than 10 fluent speakers left. Native languages often structure reality differently than English. Some have no future tense because time is circular. Others have dozens of words for snow. Something remarkable happened when one dying language became crucial for national security. More than 400 Navajo Marines developed an unbreakable military code during World War II. The Japanese had cracked every American code except this one. They were probably wondering if Americans had started speaking in grocery lists. The code used Navajo words for military terms. Dive bomber became chicken hawk. Battleship was whale. Grenades were potatoes. Messages that took encryption machines 30 minutes could be transmitted in under 30 seconds. Speed mattered when delays meant death. The Axis never cracked it, despite capturing Navajo soldiers. Even other Navajo people couldn't understand without military training. These Marines faced strange irony, though. Many had been punished for speaking Navajo in boarding schools. Now their forbidden language was helping win the war. Recognition came slowly. The program stayed classified until 1968. Many died before receiving proper honors. Their success proved something important about those boarding schools that tried eliminating native languages. Thousands of native children were taken from families between the 1870s and 1970s. The government's goal: kill the Indian, save the man. These weren't schools. They were cultural elimination centers. Children as young as 5 were forbidden from speaking native languages. Getting caught earned brutal punishments. Hair was cut short. Native names were erased. It was like sending kids to prison for the crime of being themselves. The schools operated like military installations. Children wore uniforms, marched to meals, and lived in separated dormitories. Many didn't see families for years. Children were beaten for traditional songs, locked in basements for speaking native languages, and forced to work in fields. Many died from abuse, disease, and neglect. The psychological damage lasted generations. Parents who survived couldn't bond with their own children. Traditional knowledge was interrupted. The official United States apology didn't come until 2009. But those political structures they tried to eliminate proved surprisingly resilient. tribal nations operate their own governments with elected leaders, councils, and court systems. They're actual governments with real political authority over territories and citizens. Sovereignty means tribes make laws about business, criminal justice, and resources. They issue marriage licenses, collect taxes, and manage natural resources. It's like having 574 mini-countries inside the United States, except with more complicated family relationships. Tribal police patrol reservation lands. Officers face unique challenges like jurisdictional disputes when crimes involve non-native suspects. Treaties between tribal nations and the federal government recognize this sovereignty. These aren't ancient documents. They're living legal agreements governing relationships today. But sovereignty faces constant challenges. State governments try imposing laws on tribal lands. Federal agencies override tribal decisions when convenient. These governmental powers extend to economic activities that might surprise people. About 20% of federally recognized tribes operate casinos. That means roughly 460 tribes don't have casino revenue. The idea that all Native Americans get monthly casino checks is like thinking all Americans get Disney dividends. Opening a casino in the middle of nowhere is like opening a surf shop in Kansas. Not all tribal casinos are profitable. Some lose money, especially smaller operations in remote locations. Successful casino revenues fund essential services. Healthcare clinics, schools, housing developments get built with gaming profits. The few tribes distributing individual payments see huge variation. Some people receive hundreds annually. Others might get thousands. Many tribes choose not to pursue gaming. Some have religious objections. Others lack suitable locations. But casinos represent just one small part of a much larger historical reality about tribal land. Every square inch of what became the United States was once Native American territory. Over 370 treaties were signed between tribal nations and the federal government. Nearly all were broken. By the 1880s, most tribal lands had been taken through warfare, forced sales, or legal manipulations. It's like someone stealing your entire house and offering you the tool shed as compensation. Today, Native Americans control approximately 2.3% of United States land. Much consists of areas white settlers didn't want: deserts, mountains, swamplands. Land quality varies dramatically. Some reservations sit on valuable mineral deposits. Others occupy barren ground with limited water. Water rights represent another form of ongoing theft. Many tribes lost access to rivers and lakes that sustained communities for thousands of years. The federal government holds most remaining tribal lands in trust, limiting economic development while creating bureaucratic obstacles. Despite massive land loss, Native communities had developed sophisticated agricultural systems. The Three Sisters agricultural method paired corn, beans, and squash in the same growing space. Corn stalks supported climbing bean vines. Beans fixed nitrogen that corn needed. Squash leaves retained moisture and prevented weeds. It was like having a perfectly balanced friendship where everyone actually helped each other. Hopi and Zuni farmers developed dry farming techniques, producing crops in areas receiving less than 10 inches of annual rainfall. These systems were sustainable for thousands of years without depleting soil or requiring external inputs. No chemicals, machinery, or fossil fuels, yet yields supported dense populations. Native farmers understood plant genetics before Europeans learned selective breeding. They developed hundreds of corn varieties adapted to specific climates. Agricultural knowledge passed down through hands-on training. Children learn by working alongside adults. Stories and songs encoded practical information. These farming methods contradicted European assumptions about primitive societies, just like the sophisticated tools used to implement them. Snow goggles carved from wood prevented snow blindness during Arctic travel. Narrow slits blocked harmful reflected sunlight while allowing limited vision. Obsidian blades were sharper than surgical steel and remained preferred for some medical procedures into the 20th century. European settlers probably felt foolish about their advanced metal knives. Bone knives stay sharp longer than metal and don't rust. Cactus spines made excellent fish hooks. Buffalo bladders served as waterproof containers. Tool design prioritized portability, durability, and multifunctionality. Single implements served several purposes to reduce traveling weight. Toolmaking knowledge was closely guarded within families and passed through years-long apprenticeships. Quality control was built into the social system because poor tools meant death. The sophistication extended to housing systems that were incredibly diverse. Plains tribes used teepees because they were portable and perfect for following buffalo herds. The cone shape shed wind and rain. Families could set up or take down teepees in minutes, but assuming all Native Americans lived in teepees is like assuming all Europeans lived in castles. Pueblo peoples built multi-story adobe buildings, housing entire communities. These structures stayed cool in summer and warm in winter. Some are still inhabited after over 1,000 years. Iroquois longhouses sheltered multiple related families under one roof. These could exceed 100 feet and house 20 families. Meanwhile, Seminole Cherokees were raised platforms with thatched roofs designed for hot, humid Florida swamps. Elevation protected from flooding. Inuit built igloos as temporary winter shelters, but permanent homes were semi-underground structures made from stone, whalebone, and sod. Each housing style reflected thousands of years of experimentation for specific climates and cultural needs. Unfortunately, many tribes were forced to abandon these homes during traumatic relocations. The Trail of Tears forced 5 southeastern tribes westward during the 1830s. About 4,000 Cherokee died during the journey. The Choctaw called their removal a trail of blood. It was basically a death march disguised as a relocation program. These walks spanned over 1,000 miles through difficult terrain during harsh weather. Children and elderly died first from exposure and disease. Cherokee removal was particularly brutal because they had adopted European customs, thinking assimilation would protect them. None mattered when gold was discovered on their lands. Federal troops rounded up families at gunpoint, giving minutes to gather belongings before marching to internment camps. But the Trail of Tears wasn't unique. Other forced relocations continued long after. California tribes were driven out during the gold rush. The long walk forced Navajo people 300 miles to internment. Each relocation followed the same pattern. Settlers wanted tribal lands. The government found legal justifications. Native communities were forced to abandon everything. Despite devastating experiences, many communities maintained cultural connections through special gatherings. Pow-wows are cultural celebrations combining singing, drumming, dancing, food, and community building into massive gatherings, attracting over 10,000 people. Grand Entry opens with veterans carrying flags and eagle staffs, honoring military service members from all conflicts. A dancer's outfit contains more personal history than most people's social media profiles. Regalia worn by dancers is handmade and deeply symbolic. Each piece tells stories about family or spiritual connections. Feathers must be earned through accomplishments. Different dance styles have specific meanings. Men's traditional honors warrior traditions. Women's traditional represents strength and grace. Fancy dance showcases athletic ability. Drum groups provide powwow heartbeats with songs lasting 20 minutes or longer. Singers train for years to learn hundreds of songs. Food vendors serve traditional dishes alongside modern favorites. Food areas become social hubs for catching up with distant friends. These celebrations showcase how traditional Native culture influenced broader American arts. Drumming patterns and vocal techniques from Native traditions directly influenced jazz and blues development. Early jazz musicians absorbed rhythmic concepts from Plains Indian drumming. The American music industry basically got a free masterclass from people they were simultaneously trying to eliminate. Call and response patterns common in Native singing became fundamental elements of African American gospel, jazz, and blues. Powwow step represents recent fusion of electronic dance music with traditional tribal beats. DJs sample powwow drumming and layer it with synthesizers. Native musicians brought tribal themes to mainstream rock through various bands. Guitar playing incorporated techniques inspired by traditional instruments. The Native American Music Awards recognize indigenous artists working in every genre from traditional to hip-hop to country music. Native musicians face unique industry challenges, though. Labels often want stereotypical Indian sounds rather than artistic freedom. This musical influence extends into visual arts and fashion. Regalia includes feathers, beadwork, ribbon work, and symbolism requiring hundreds of hours to create by hand. Each piece represents cultural meanings, its wearable art telling stories. Contemporary native designers blend traditional tribal patterns with modern fashion silhouettes, creating clothing that works in urban environments while maintaining cultural integrity. It's like trying to decide whether having your culture on a shoe is honor or insult. Major athletic brands collaborate with native designers on special edition sneakers incorporating tribal designs. These partnerships generate controversy about cultural appropriation. Beadwork can take dozens of hours per piece, with artists creating intricate patterns requiring mathematical precision. Fashion shows at Pow-wows showcase traditional and contemporary native design. Models wear everything from ancestral regalia to modern interpretations. Contemporary designers struggle with mass market appropriation. Fashion companies regularly steal native patterns for commercial products without permission. This connects to larger questions about how tribal names have been misunderstood. Sioux is a French mispronunciation of an Ojibwe word meaning little snake or enemy. The people called Sioux prefer their own names, Lakota, Dakota, or Nakota. These names mean friend. It's like everyone decided to call Americans those loud people with hamburgers instead of learning what they actually call themselves. Apache comes from Spanish, but many Apache people call themselves Ndi, meaning the people. The Spanish term probably derived from a Zuni word for enemy. Navajo is also Spanish in origin. The proper term is Diné, which also means the people. European explorers frequently asked wrong questions or got answers they couldn't interpret due to language barriers. Many tribal names that sound Indian are actually words from different tribes. Names stuck because they appeared on government documents, becoming official designations that overrode what people called themselves. Some tribes have successfully reclaimed original names in recent decades, but government agencies resist changing historical documents. These naming issues connect to deeper misconceptions about how tribal communities organize their leadership, particularly regarding gender roles. Women leaders controlled major decisions in many native tribes centuries before America elected its first female anything important. Iroquois clan mothers selected male chiefs and could remove them from power if they messed up. It was like having a board of directors made up of your smartest ants who weren't afraid to fire you. The system worked brilliantly. Clan mothers chose chiefs based on wisdom and leadership skills rather than who could yell the loudest. If a chief made terrible decisions, the clan mothers simply picked someone else. But the Cherokee had their own powerful female leader too. Wilma Mankiller became the first female principal chief of the Cherokee Nation in 1985. That wasn't revolutionary for Cherokee culture, though. Then there's the Apache warrior Lozin, who fought alongside her brother against Mexican and American forces. Apache people believed she could sense enemy locations through spiritual powers. While European women couldn't vote or own property, many Native women were making decisions that affected entire nations. This female leadership connected to family structures that were equally surprising. Matrilineal societies like the Navajo, Hopi, and Haudenosaunee traced family connections through the mother's side rather than the father's. Children automatically belonged to their mother's clan. It was like the opposite of every sitcom where the wife has to deal with her mother-in-law. Here, the husband had to impress his wife's entire extended family every single day. When couples married, husbands often moved into their wife's family home. Meanwhile, maternal uncles played crucial roles in raising their sisters' sons. Property ownership followed the maternal line too. Houses, land, and valuable possessions belonged to women and passed from mothers to daughters. Children took their mother's clan identity, which determined who they could marry and what ceremonies they could participate in. If a marriage ended, women kept their property, their children, and their place in the community. The matrilineal focus extended into spiritual practices that governed daily life. Spirit was present in animals, rivers, rocks, and sky according to most native belief systems. People made daily offerings to the sun, ancestors, or animals to maintain balance. Sacred tools played essential roles in daily spiritual practices. Smudge sticks made from sage, sweetgrass, or cedar were burned to cleanse negative energy. It was like having a direct hotline to customer service with the universe, except the universe actually answered and helped solve problems. Dreams carried enormous significance in most native cultures too. People interpreted dreams as messages from spirits, ancestors, or animal guides. Morning prayers were common in many tribes. People greeted the sun with songs, offerings, or spoken thanks. But it wasn't just humans who were considered spiritual. Animals were treated as spiritual beings with their own purposes. Hunters performed ceremonies before and after kills, thanking the animal's spirit. These spiritual beliefs found expression in stories that taught important life lessons. Coyote, raven, and spider are major figures in native storytelling traditions across different tribes. These trickster characters were humorous but carried serious moral lessons about consequences and proper behavior. Trickster tales represented chaos, wit, and unexpected consequences from breaking social rules. Coyote might steal fire for humans, but burn his tail in the process. These characters were basically the original cautionary tales, except way funnier than anything adults usually tried to teach kids. The stories were specifically tailored to each generation and situation. Elders chose which trickster tales to tell based on what lessons children needed to learn. But tricksters weren't just negative examples. They also showed how intelligence, creativity, and persistence could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Different tribes had their own versions of trickster characters adapted to local environments and cultural values. These oral traditions preserved knowledge that was also recorded in written forms. The Cherokee syllabary was invented in 1821 by a Cherokee man who created 85 characters representing every sound in the Cherokee language. Within a few years, Cherokee literacy rates were higher than those of nearby white settlers. It was like someone deciding to invent their own alphabet and then having it work so well that everyone else looked bad at reading. The Cherokee Phoenix newspaper began publishing in 1828 in both Cherokee and English. The paper covered tribal politics and community news. Meanwhile, Cree syllabics also existed before the Canadian Confederation, allowing Cree communities to read and write in their own language. The Cherokee writing system spread rapidly because it was specifically designed for Cherokee sounds. Children learned to read and write Cherokee faster than they could learn English. Cherokee communities were becoming more literate in their own language than most Americans were in English. These educational achievements led to institutions that continue today. Over 30 tribal colleges offer degrees in culture, law, and science, while blending traditional and Western teachings. Diné College was the first tribal college, established in 1968. It's like having colleges designed by people who actually understand that not everyone can move hundreds of miles away and pretend their culture doesn't exist for 4 years. Tribal colleges serve students who might not succeed at traditional universities due to cultural differences, geographic isolation, or family responsibilities. Students might study molecular biology in the morning and traditional plant medicine in the afternoon. Language preservation forms a crucial part of tribal college curricula. Students can take classes taught entirely in tribal languages, but these colleges also serve as community centers for surrounding reservations. They host cultural events and provide meeting spaces. These educational approaches reflected traditional parenting methods. Children were seen as sacred beings rather than property to be controlled, and they weren't punished harshly for normal childhood mistakes. Instead of physical punishment, Native parents used storytelling and natural consequences. It was like having a whole village of babysitters, except they were all related to you and actually cared about turning you into a decent human being. Grandparents and extended family raised children communally rather than leaving all responsibility to just parents. Storytelling served as the primary method for teaching life lessons. Instead of lecturing children, parents told stories that illustrated consequences of good and bad choices. Natural consequences replaced artificial punishments too. If a child didn't help with food preparation, they might go hungry. The community took collective responsibility for all children's welfare. If parents died, other families automatically took over. This nurturing approach was supported by traditional medicine systems. Willow bark contains the same active ingredient as aspirin and was used by native healers for pain relief centuries before pharmaceutical companies synthesized acetylsalicylic acid. It turns out that burning certain plants actually does kill bacteria and viruses, which means traditional healers were practicing antiseptic medicine before anyone knew what germs were. Sweetgrass and sage were used to cleanse and disinfect areas where sick people were treated. Devil's Club contains compounds that treat colds and inflammation. But native medicine involved much more than just plants. Healing ceremonies addressed spiritual and emotional causes of illness alongside physical symptoms. Traditional diagnostic methods included observing patient behavior and consulting spiritual sources for guidance. Treatment often involved the entire community rather than just individual patients. Many traditional remedies are still used today by native healers working alongside modern medical doctors. The effectiveness of traditional medicine was supported by diets that promoted health. Pre-contact native diets contained no sugar, little salt, no dairy, and consisted primarily of wild rice, bison, squash, fish, berries, and corn. These foods provided complete nutrition without processed ingredients. It was basically the ancient version of energy bars, except it actually tasted good and didn't require a chemistry degree to pronounce the ingredients. Pemmican served as the original protein bar, combining dried meat with berries and fat to create a portable, high-energy food that could last for months. Seasonal eating patterns ensured dietary variety. Spring brought fresh greens. Summer provided berries and vegetables. Fall meant nuts and harvest crops. But here's something important. Fry bread, often considered a traditional native food, actually came from government rations. It wasn't part of traditional diets at all. Wild foods contained higher levels of vitamins and beneficial compounds than domesticated alternatives. The physical activity required to obtain traditional foods contributed to overall health. Jim Thorpe won Olympic gold medals in both pentathlon and decathlon in 1912, then played professional football, baseball, and basketball. He was voted the greatest athlete of the first half of the 20th century. It was like soccer, except with sticks, more violence, and the occasional spiritual vision quest happening during halftime. Lacrosse originated from tribal games that could involve hundreds of players on fields stretching for miles between villages. Then, there were the long-distance foot messengers who regularly ran 50 miles or more to carry messages between tribal communities. These runners maintained communication networks across vast territories without horses. Traditional games served multiple purposes beyond entertainment. They built physical fitness, taught strategic thinking, and strengthened social bonds. Many tribal sports involved gambling and ceremonial elements that made them important cultural events. The athletic achievements were supported by ceremonial practices. Sundance ceremonies involved fasting, piercing, and dancing for spiritual renewal. Participants danced continuously for up to 4 days without food or water while connected to a sacred pole. It was like running a marathon, except the marathon lasted 4 days and included voluntary body piercing for spiritual reasons. Sweat lodges were used for purification through intense heat and steam. Participants sat in small enclosed structures where temperatures could exceed 150 degrees. Vision quests required solitude in remote wilderness areas for extended periods without food or shelter. Young people typically undertook these journeys during transitions to adulthood. These ceremonies weren't casual weekend activities, though. They required months of preparation and community support. The physical challenges were intentional parts of the spiritual process. Fasting and endurance tests were believed to open pathways for communication with spiritual forces. Many ceremonies remained private and sacred. The spiritual authority demonstrated connected to political rights that face constant challenges. Treaties give tribes legal rights to self-governance, but enforcement remains spotty. Water rights, pipeline construction, and land access create frequent legal battles. It was like having to fight a legal battle while camping in freezing weather because someone wanted to build a potential environmental disaster through your backyard. The Standing Rock protests opposed the Dakota Access Pipeline construction under the Missouri River. Thousands of protesters gathered to prevent pipeline construction that threatened the tribe's water supply. But there's another problem. Tribal courts often lack jurisdiction over non-native individuals who commit crimes on reservation lands, creating situations where serious crimes go unpunished. State governments frequently attempt to impose taxes or regulations on tribal lands in violation of treaty agreements. Gaming compact negotiations between tribes and states often involve political pressure and threats to limit tribal gaming revenues. Environmental protection issues create ongoing sovereignty challenges when pollution from off-reservation activities affects tribal lands. These sovereignty challenges affect how tribal communities are represented in popular culture. Western movies consistently show inaccurate images of Native people wearing Plains Indian clothing, living in teepees, and using war paint regardless of which tribes they're supposed to represent. It's like making a movie about Europeans and having everyone wear kilts, live in igloos, and speak with French accents. Most native roles in Hollywood films are played by non-native actors who often can't pronounce tribal language words correctly. Hollywood narratives typically erase differences between hundreds of distinct tribal cultures by presenting generic Indian characters. The few mainstream films featuring authentic native perspectives like Smoke Signals and Reservation Dogs were created by native writers and actors. Native communities have their own film festivals and media outlets that create accurate representations, but these receive limited distribution. Television depictions often focus exclusively on historical settings while ignoring that most Native Americans live in urban areas. These media misrepresentations connect to demographic realities that surprise many people. Over 70% of Native Americans live in urban areas rather than on reservations, with major populations in cities like Phoenix, Los Angeles, and Tulsa. It's like discovering that most cowboys actually live in apartments and work in offices, except the cowboys never really existed in the first place. Urban Native identity remains strong despite geographic distance from ancestral homelands. City-dwelling Native people participate in powwows and practice traditional religions. Native Americans balance cultural preservation with urban assimilation. They might work in corporate offices during the week and attend traditional ceremonies on weekends. Urban Native communities often include people from multiple tribes who create intertribal cultural centers and social organizations. Economic opportunities in cities attract Native families seeking better jobs and healthcare access. But Native urban communities face unique challenges, including cultural isolation and the difficulty of maintaining tribal traditions. This urban reality connects to cultural survival strategies that include humor. Humor serves as a coping mechanism in Native communities where laughter helps people survive historical trauma and contemporary challenges. Elders often tell jokes even at funerals. The unofficial motto of many Native communities might as well be, "We've been laughing since 1492, because if you can't find humor in surviving 5 centuries of attempted genocide, you're probably taking life too seriously." Powwow MCs playfully roast dancers and announcers during competitions, creating entertainment that builds community bonds. Native comedy often focuses on survival, adaptation, and the absurdities of dealing with bureaucracy and stereotypes. Teasing and playful insults function as social bonding mechanisms that strengthen relationships while teaching appropriate behavior. Self-deprecating humor allows Native people to address painful topics like poverty and historical trauma without becoming overwhelmed by anger. Native comedians use their platforms to educate audiences about contemporary Native life while challenging stereotypes. The persistence of Native humor throughout centuries of attempted cultural destruction demonstrates the resilience of communities that refuse to be defeated. These 30 facts reveal the depth, complexity, and richness of Native American cultures that most people never learn about in school or see in movies.